Hey guys, welcome back to another lecture today, which is on pneumothorax. This is an important question that has been asked in many formats, both direct as well as indirect as a case presentation. If you like the content of my channel and lectures, please subscribe and hit the bell icon next to it so that you get immediate notifications whenever I post a video. Share it among your friends so that they can also benefit. Now coming to the topic proper. So whenever a question is asked, start with a definition. What is the definition of a pneumothorax? So, a pneumothorax is defined as a collection of air between parietal and visceral pleura. So, there are two layers in your lungs, covering your lungs, which is the inner one, which is visceral pleura, and the outside one, which is parietal pleura. So, whenever there is air collection between these two, then it is called as pneumothorax. As you can see here, see between the parietal and the visceral pleura, you can see a large amount of air. And this is pushing upon the lungs, collapsing it, and the whole mediastinum is shifted to this side, compressing on the opposite lung, pushing the heart and shifting the trachea. Isn't it so? If this shift is causing a hemodynamic compromise, then it is called as a tension pneumothorax. How do you classify a pneumothorax? So a classification of pneumothorax can be in many ways. It can be large or small, it can be open or closed, it can be traumatic or non-traumatic, it can be primary or secondary. We will see what these terms mean because these can be used in various combinations. Okay. So a large versus small pneumothorax is based upon an X-ray finding. Remember, the X-ray should be a conventional X-ray. Why? Because in a conventional X-ray is what you see in the child is what you get on the X-ray. Whereas digital X-ray, you can digitally alter the size of the X-ray proportionately. So in an adolescent population, you call it as a large pneumothorax if the distance is more than 2 centimeters from the lung margin to the chest wall. Where do you measure this? At the level of hilum. So at the level of hilum, from the chest wall to the lung margin, if the distance is more than or equal to 2 centimeters, then you call it as a large pneumothorax. What do you call otherwise? If there is more than 3 centimeter of air between the pleural line and the apical chest wall, even then it is called as a large pneumothorax. What about the younger children? If more than 30% of hemothorax is or hemithorax is made up of air, not lung air, then you call it as a large pneumothorax. What is open versus closed? If there is a traumatic injury or traumatic penetration of the chest, then the air from the outside gets sucked into the lungs. That is the open pneumothorax. Closed pneumothorax is there is no communication to outside atmosphere. There is something wrong with the lungs which is releasing air into the pleura. Then that is a closed pneumothorax. What is spontaneous versus non-spontaneous? Spontaneous is without trauma. Per se, by itself, something is wrong and it is causing a pneumothorax. Non-spontaneous is some trauma. It can be intentional, unintentional, medical error, etc. Primary versus secondary. Primary is a pneumothorax in a patient without any underlying lung or connective tissue disorder. That is predisposing the patient for pneumothorax basically. And secondary is a patient is already having an underlying disorder and that is what is causing this pneumothorax. The distinction between primary and secondary sometimes becomes very, gray. Because what you think immediately on seeing the child, this child is not having any primary disorder, but on investigation, you find out there is some underlying reason. Then this child becomes a secondary pneumothorax. So most of this classification, primary versus secondary, can apply after you diagnose and treat the child rather than before. What are the etiologies? You can divide it into non-spontaneous and a spontaneous pneumothorax. Okay. A non-spontaneous pneumothorax can be iatrogenic or non-iatrogenic. Okay. Non-iatrogenic is there is a blunt trauma or a penetrating trauma. Okay. So this is not going to happen in a hospital setting. A hospital setting, iatrogenic injury can happen due to your procedures. It can be a tracheostomy, it can be a thoracotomy, or you are going to do a needle puncture, but you are introducing a pneumothorax into the child, or you are giving too much inspiratory pressure in your mechanical ventilation or too much PEEP. that is causing your pneumothorax, or you're trying to place a central line but you have punctured the pleura, that will cause a pneumothorax. That is very common with subclavian lines. So this is non-spontaneous pneumothorax. It is either iatrogenic or non-iatrogenic. What about spontaneous pneumothorax? See, spontaneous pneumothorax can be divided into primary and secondary if there is an underlying cause or non-underlying cause. So primary, in a patient who has a subpleural bleb, they are prone for pneumothorax because they can rupture into the pleural space. Tall, thin body habitus. These patients, again, they are prone. They can be having Marfan syndrome also. You need to evaluate them. Secondary spontaneous pneumothorax. So there is something wrong in the lung, a majorly wrong problem in the lung. But the patient is having a pneumothorax without any, without any push from the outside. So imagine a child who is having a congenital lung malformation, CCAM, congenital cystic adenomatoid malformations, or a bronchogenic cyst. So these can rupture and they can result in a pneumothorax. Something that is increasing the transthoracic pressure, like an asthma, like a bronchiolitis, like a cystic fibrosis, or like a foreign body, which is just letting air in, but it's not letting the air out. Then there is going to be air trapping. So any air trapping due to any reason increases intrathoracic pressure and transthoracic pressure, and it causes pneumothorax. If there is an infection, remember, infection with staphylococcus, infection with Klebsiella can cause pneumatoceles, and this will predispose the child to have a pneumothorax. Other causes like Marfan syndrome and Ehlers-Danlos, they predispose the patient to have a pneumothorax. So genetic risk factors, FCLN, folliculin gene mutations. These are associated with familial and recurrent pneumothoraxes. Inherited disorders like alpha-1 antitrypsin and homocystinuria again predisposes. Any collagen synthesis defect, like in the case of Marfan syndrome and Ehlers-Danlos, predispose the patient to have pneumothorax. So these three genetic risk factors we need to remember. Why is this important? Because the management varies. A child who has, say, infection, you don't expect the child to have recurrent pneumothorax, isn't it so? This pneumothorax is associated due to, or this risk is due to this current infection. This child is not going to continue to have the risk in future. But whereas imagine a patient with Ehlers-Danlos, imagine a patient who has a folliculin gene mutation. These patients are prone to have recurrent pneumothoraxes. So you need to forethink those things, expect those occurrences, and manage them when you catch hold of them. So this is again the same picture that we discussed earlier, that we saw earlier. So if you see, there is a large accumulation of air here. And what has it caused? It has caused the collapse of this lung. Isn't it so? So what happens in this collapsed lung? The air will not be able to circulate. Isn't it so? But what happens to the blood? The blood still circulates here. So what happens? You are just running blood through an area where there is no air. There is just perfusion, but there is no air. So this is called as a intrapulmonary shunting. The blood goes in and comes out as such. There is no gas exchange happening in that area. Okay. So this is one aspect that we need to remember while managing the child. Next, what happens? There is an increased pressure in this area. Isn't it so? So the whole intrathoracic pressure is increased. What happens to the venous return at that point in time? You need to have a negative pressure in the chest for the venous return to come back. When there is a positive pressure, the venous return will get reduced. If return is reduced, the output is also going to be reduced. So there will be decreased cardiac output and the child will go into shock. Such a case is called as a tension pneumothorax. Next, what happens? This pressure is too much. It is pushing upon the opposite lung. See, the opposite lung is anatomically good, functionally good. But what is happening here? This is pushing upon the opposite lung so much that the good lung is also not able to expand, and that is again decreasing the gas exchange. So these are all the consequences of a pneumothorax. So there is increased pressure in intrapleural space. There is collapse of lung. So there is no air circulation happening, alveolar hypoventilation. Correct? Next, without alveolar ventilation, there is just perfusion happening. Only blood supply is happening. So there is intrapulmonary shunting hypoxemia and acidosis. Correct? Next, due to increased pressure, what happens? There is reduced venous return and reduced cardiac output, so low output cardiac failure. Then there is shift of mediastinal structures to the other side, and the normal lung is unable to expand, resulting in further compromise of ventilation. The affected lung is also not ventilating, the normal lung is also not ventilating. Ultimately, this child will end up with hypoxemia and acidosis sequence. Okay. This increased pressure can also track through air spaces. All the air spaces are connected, interconnected with each other. So if it goes into mediastinum, it will cause a pneumomediastinum. If it goes down, it causes a pneumoperitoneum. If it goes sideways into the skin, it causes a subcutaneous emphysema. So these are all the things that you need to remember in managing and also in writing in your paper the pathogenesis. What happens to the affected lung? What happens to the ventilation and perfusion in affected lung? What happens to the opposite lung? What happens to things coming from down to up, that is venous return? And what can happen if the air tracks sideways? How will the child present? This child will obviously present with increased breathlessness, isn't it so? And initially there can be a chest pain, okay, because parietal pleura is irritated. And there can be a dry cough. What are you going to examine in this child? What are the things you will look for in a vital signs? See, this child is going to have tachypnea, tachycardia. That is a given, isn't it so? You are going to look specifically for hypotension and cyanosis, because those are the signs of tension pneumothorax. And if those signs are going to be present, then what are you going to do? You will be very quick in your management and try to remove the tension in the intrathoracic area. For clinical features, again, we will be looking at the same diagram. So in your inspection, what are your findings? Your trachea is shifted to this side and your right lung is full, or your right hemithorax is going to look full, and there is no place to expand, isn't it so? Because it is completely filled with pleural air. Palpation, again, you will confirm your tracheal shift and you will see that your apical impulse also has moved to the opposite side of pneumothorax. And on percussion, a tympanic note will be heard in this air-filled area. And auscultation, since there is no air circulation, see, your lung is collapsed towards the mediastinum, isn't it so? There will be reduced or complete absence of breath sounds. Again, the same findings. See, this is a normal trachea and lung. Sorry if this is looking very childish. This is my first attempt at diagram in PowerPoint. Okay, so this pneumothorax has collapsed the lung towards the mediastinum. There is a tracheal shift, and in X-ray, apart from these findings, you can also find that the normal dome-shaped diaphragm will become flattened. So investigations wise, X-ray will be your first investigation of choice. Okay, what are the findings you will see in an X-ray? Pleural line. Pleural line is just visceral pleura being demarcated by your pneumothorax or air inside. And there will be hyperlucency. See, you see that this is more black compared to this side. And there are no vessel markings. See, you can follow these vessels here. But here there are no vessels. This is completely filled with air. And you can see the collapsed lung, which is towards the mediastinum. Okay. And if this lung is more, the whole mediastinum will be shifted to the opposite side. And this diaphragm, you see, usually your right diaphragm will be higher compared to that of left diaphragm because of the presence of liver. But in this case, it is pushed down and it is lower or almost at the same level of your left hemidiaphragm. Okay. And there can be widening of intercostal spaces. These are the findings that you will look for in an X-ray chest. Ultrasound, I think that should be a separate lecture in itself, because we need to touch upon what are the normal findings in a lung before coming to what are the findings in a pneumothorax. So we will just skip that for now. Just remember, in ultrasound, absence of lung sliding is a very important sign. CT scan, very rarely you will require a CT scan, because most of the pneumothoraxes you will be able to find out in an X-ray. Okay, CT scan will help if this child is already having a underlying lung condition like a cystic fibrosis, or if you think that this child is having a pleural bleb, so that you know the exact location for surgical management. What are the types of management? You can do a conservative management. You can do a needle thoracotomy, You can do a intercostal drainage tube, or you can do pleurodesis. But when and how are you going to apply these managements? We will see them in a small outline. Okay, so conservative management is only for small pneumothoraxes and the child is stable hemodynamically. Okay, how will oxygen going to help? Oxygen is going to help in oxygenation. It is as simple as that. Okay, it will help in reabsorption of pneumothorax. So this oxygen should be given only in a hospital setting, because you need to monitor. You don't know how this child is going to go, whether this child is going to improve or deteriorate. So admit the child, monitor, do serial radiograph, serial x-rays every 6 to 12 hours depending upon the severity, and see if the child is having persistent pneumothorax at 48 hours, or you feel that the pneumothorax is increasing at any point in time, then you will have to go for intercostal drainage. So this is an outline of how you manage a case of pneumothorax. So if it is a tension pneumothorax, it is straightforward. You need to do a needle thoracotomy to decompress your thoracic pressure. Okay, because you need your cardiac output. So you do a needle thoracotomy, and then that is not the end of it. You will still place a chest tube. If it is a small pneumothorax first episode, you don't see any other risk factors, then wait and watch conservative management with repeated x-rays. If it is a large pneumothorax, okay, and this is the first episode, see if this child is having an underlying risk factor. You see that this child is having an underlying risk factor or underlying lung disease is there. Okay, say a pneumonia, or say this child is a cystic fibrosis child. Two case scenarios we will take. So one child has a progressive disorder where there is increased risk of recurrent pneumothorax. In that case, you will put a chest tube, manage this current pneumothorax, but you will plan for a surgical intervention to prevent recurrent pneumothorax. But say suppose this child has a static disease like Klebsiella pneumonia, pneumotocele, which has ruptured, and this child has gone on to have a pneumothorax. Then you will just put in a chest tube, you will give oxygen, you will give supportive care, wait for this pneumothorax to resolve. Okay, you will not plan for a surgical intervention in this child if this child's pneumothorax resolves. Unresolving, complicated, that is a different case scenario. Okay. So suppose without underlying lung disease, this child is having a pretty decent lung, but somehow this child is having a pneumothorax. Okay. Then what you can do is needle aspiration if it is tension pneumothorax, then conservative management and wait and watch what is happening if this child is resolving on its own. If this child is having recurrent pneumothorax, it will be same as managing a child with progressive disease. You will treat the current pneumothorax with ICD, but you will plan for surgical intervention because this child has had a second, third, or fourth pneumothorax. Clear on this? Coming to needle aspiration. When will you do a needle aspiration? If it is a tension pneumothorax, isn't it so? So with a large bore catheter with a stopcock at the end, at the second intercostal space at mid-clavicular line. This is the point that you need to remember. Okay. Second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, put the needle and aspirate. Okay. Remember, that is not the end of treatment. Okay. You should do a close monitoring after doing a needle aspiration, because in 20 to 50% of cases, there will be reaccumulation of pneumothorax. So you need to monitor them with serial x-rays and follow up with the ICD. So ICD, again, that should be a separate class in itself. ICD should be a one-way valve. Okay. So the air should go from lungs to outside through the tube into a water seal device. It should never be the other way around. So that is why a one-way valve. Okay. How do you monitor a child on ICD? If there are no bubbles in the water seal device, as soon as you put in ICD, you will see that water will bubble in the underwater seal. Okay. And if there is no bubbling for 12 hours together, clamp the tube and wait and see how this child is responding. If there is a reaccumulation of pneumothorax or if the child is worsening, if there is no reaccumulation of air, then you remove the ICD, do an X-ray after 24 hours. Okay. So there are two X-rays that you need to do. You will clamp, wait for 24 hours, do an X-ray. If there is no reaccumulation, remove the chest tube, do an X-ray again after 24 hours. Okay, if there is nothing, then you can relax. If there is reaccumulation, you need to think of a underlying cause, that is again and again making the child to reaccumulate air, and hence pneumothorax. Remember, too much pressure in the beginning of ICD, too much suction is also not good, because there can be re-expansion pulmonary edema. When do you do surgery in pneumothorax? Only if there is a risk of recurrent pneumothorax, to put it very, very simply. Okay. So if there is underlying bleb, subpleural bleb, or if there is a tear in visceral pleura due to any reason, then they staple or oversew that area. If there is an abnormal lung tissue, they will resect that particular lobe. They can do these via a conventional thoracotomy, a mini thoracotomy, or a video assisted thoracoscopic surgery. Pleurodesis is a procedure to obliterate the interpleural space, because that is where air is going to reaccumulate. If you close that space, there is nowhere for the air to go. So it can be done by either mechanical or chemical pleurodesis. Mechanical is preferred in children compared to chemical pleurodesis. So that is it about pneumothorax. So if a question is asked, start with a definition, the classifications of pneumothorax, what are the etiologies, spontaneous, non-spontaneous, traumatic, non-traumatic, primary, secondary. Then go ahead with your pathogenesis, clinical features, investigations, write in detail about X-ray, then others, just 2 lines is more than enough. And management, depending upon if it is a tension pneumothorax, non-tension, first episode, recurrent episode, with underlying disorder or without underlying disorders. Thank you for your patient listening. If you have any glitches, it is because of interrupted internet supply. I apologize to you all in advance. If you like the lecture, please subscribe, and thank you all.